This video is brought to you by my Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for your support. I have a wild story to tell you. So basically, on this channel, I look at Disney music, but I've also gone into like parody and satire of Disney music. And I think it's important because when looking at the company's impact, it's important to look at things created for Disney, but also things created in reaction to it, or critiquing it, or even just referencing it. Because I think by looking at those things, you can really understand what Disney means to other people. And that brings us to a certain Berlin-based hip-hop collective. So Dagobert Duck is just Scrooge McDuck. That is his German name. And there are plenty of songs that reference him and say similar things. On the surface, this might just seem like a nod to a cartoon duck. But in the city of Berlin, Scrooge McDuck also has a completely different meaning. So let's talk about DuckTales, bomb threats, and one of Berlin's most beloved criminals. Donald Duck is very popular in Germany and Scandinavia. For example, in pretty much every Scandinavian country, the Donald Duck Christmas special is a nationwide tradition. In Germany, it's mainly about the Donald Duck comics. The Carl Banks comics are incredibly popular, and it's much easier to find like Donald Duck comics than any other Disney character. And in Germany specifically, there's even a term to refer to sort of the phenomenon of Donald Duck, or like the fandom of it. And the term is Donaldismus, which basically just means Donaldism, and it was coined in the 70s. And there's also like a German Donaldism organization, and it's called the Deutsche Organisation nicht kommerzieller Anhänger des lauteren Donaldismus, which is a fantastic name. I have no notes. And of course, it's an acronym for Donald. So we love that. I think this is so cool, and I think you should check it out. They have an annual like convention sort of meeting, and the next one is at the end of March. So if you want me to go, please write in the comments below. And if you want to help support the channel so I can do fun stuff like that, because that is literally on the opposite side of the country to where I am now, you can support me on Patreon, because that is how I fund the show. That is how I keep the show going. So yeah, anyway, Donald Duck and his sordid universe is very popular in Germany. But you may be wondering, why are people referencing Scrooge McDuck? This is where the story gets really wild. So let's start here at KaDeWe, which is short for Kaufhaus des Westens. It has a really long history, in addition to also just being known as the place in West Berlin to go buy fancy products and jewelry and clothing or whatever. But in the spring of 1988, something was about to happen there that would change Berlin culture. A guy named Arno Funke had made a pipe bomb and was going to plant it in the store. He was basically a guy who wanted to be a cartoonist, but it didn't really work out, and so he was taking like commercial paint jobs when he could. But by the end of the 80s, he was very depressed, and he later decided that he would become an extortionist as sort of a get-rich-quick scheme. And so he planted the bomb in KaDeWe, and he wrote them a letter asking for 500,000 Deutsche Marks. But he failed because the bomb never went off. So he tried it again. And the second time, he used like a modified suitcase to discreetly drop the bomb in the sports department. And he had a timer and everything on the bomb, so it would only explode after the store closed. And sure enough, it did that night. And he sent another letter asking for the same thing, and basically saying that if they didn't pay, he would continue to plant bombs and stuff like that. And so he ended up being successful that time. And he had a whole elaborate scheme that he used to get the money. For example, he used messages that he made using like a voice modulator to disguise his voice, and he broadcast them on a two-way radio. And he would also use payphones while using the voice changer as well. An important thing to note up front is that he had a special like code that he himself followed, which is that he didn't want to harm anybody. And that will be important later. After this whole situation, he just went back to his life. After a few years, he was married, had a family, and was once again out of money and was on welfare. So he decided that he was going to start extortion again to be able to make more money. But this time, he would do it under a specific name, Dagobert. He said he got the name from a bag his son used that had Dagobert Duck on it. And that would be a bag he would use later in an extortion situation where he would have the police put the money in the Dagobert bag. He would also say that he wanted to swim in money like Scrooge McDuck, which became a headline at the time, and to this day, when people think about this scenario, that's one of the most memorable parts about it. So when I see people referencing that in songs, I can't help but think about the history of that. So Dagobert would continue extorting, building bombs, and getting money. Though sometimes the police would trick him by, like, for example, filling a bag with mostly newspaper and just a little bit of money instead of the full amount he requested. And sometimes he would even stand them up, like writing a letter apologizing and say that they're gonna have to reschedule, as if it wasn't like an extortion situation with the police trying to catch him. Also, keep in mind that he was doing this all in secret. Like, none of his family knew, and he had a separate place where he would go to hone his craft and to make bombs and to strategize. And the public was also paying attention to his escapades. And he became a sort of like cult figure. People were selling t-shirts saying, "I am Dagobert," and many people in Berlin were actively rooting for him. People were just fascinated by this criminal who didn't harm people, but was able to outsmart the police in what seemed just like such comical, weird ways. So many people just saw it as sort of a trivial, definitely criminal, but a trivial, odd cat and mouse chase. This seemingly clever guy kept just getting away from the police in wilder and wilder scenarios. In one situation, apparently one of the policemen actually grabbed him by the arm, but then he slipped on dog feces and Dagobert got away. The police were furious, and they would even invite press to come to the extortion setups in hopes that they would catch him and then be able to run stories about it immediately after. There was an entire police division established just to track down Dagobert, and they would apparently read the Donald Duck comics to get ideas about his potential schemes. Which brings us to this wild photo of a real-life police badge that has Scrooge McDuck on it. Which, I can't believe this is real, but it is. It's not a joke, I promise. This is real. Anyway, so the crimes continued, and it wasn't just Berlin who was hooked. The entirety of Germany was keeping tabs on the whole situation. The police opened up a tip line with a reward for anyone who could help them catch Dagobert, and they would get like tens of thousands of tips, with many people also just deliberately giving false information, seemingly to mess up the investigation. One of the most infamous extortion attempts that he did was when he set up the meeting point just in a street, specifically asking them to put the box on top of a manhole. And the police had there was a motion sensor so they could know exactly when he grabbed it. But the weirdest thing happened where the motion sensor was going wild, but no one was there. And then later they found out that Dagobert was actually under the manhole. Of course, they eventually got him. They found out that he rented one of the cars associated with one of the extortion attempts. And they eventually surrounded him outside of a phone booth. He served 7 years and 9 months in prison, and though he stopped committing crimes, the public's fascination with this whole situation never really went away, and it's still there to this day. One of my personal favorite relics from this time is the 1994 song Da Da Dagobert, which was released under the name Dr. No. There were a few people involved with this track, but from what I understand, it was mainly headed by Uwe Haida, and it's a super interesting song. It samples Dagobert's real voice, and there are just some great lines. Da Da Dagobert, ne Million verkehrt, da Da Dagobert, tanzte Entenhausen. There is a fantastic music video. It's a lot of fun, so definitely check it out. Berlin's a city that is very much known for its history of electronic music, and so if you also just want to hear a really good dance track from the 90s, I'm gonna link to it in the description. You can also find it on streaming platforms and stuff. It's a really unique reminder of a particular moment in Germany. And now you know about something that I think is one of the most interesting pieces of Disney history.